All right, well, good afternoon and welcome to folks. As you join, we're going to get started in about 60 seconds. All right, well, good afternoon, and thank you all so much. Welcome, and thank you for joining us for Powering Up Minnesota, leveraging federal funds to drive local investment. My name is Justin Fay. I'm the lead director of public affairs here at Fresh Energy. For those of you not familiar with us, Fresh Energy is a 30-year-old nonpartisan nonprofit organization working to achieve carbon neutral economies by 2050. Our topic today is right on point for that work, as we'll be discussing the historic opportunity of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and what it means for Minnesota. We've got a lot to talk about, but first I'd like to take a few moments to do some quick housekeeping. We'll be taking questions at the end of the webinar, but you can submit them at any time. We'll be using Zoom's Q&A function, so please click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. This webinar is being recorded, and we will send out a link to the recording later this afternoon or early tomorrow, so please keep an eye on your inbox for that. I definitely want to say thank you to our promotional partner, Kier, for helping spread the word about this event, and also a special thanks to my colleagues here at Fresh Energy who have collaborated to put together this timely discussion today. And now to the topic of the day. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, also known sometimes as the IIJA or Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, will funnel a historic $1.2 trillion into states, about $6.8 billion of which is headed to Minnesota. These funds will go toward much needed investments in weatherization assistance, energy efficiency, power and grid, electric transportation, and more, all of which play a major role in our climate future as we seek energy independence. We have an excellent lineup of presenters and panelists today, and we'll be hearing from them in 3 sections. First, we'll hear from federal and state agency leaders sharing their updates on implementing portions of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and where they see major opportunities. Second, we have a panel of Minnesota-based stakeholders monitoring and preparing for infrastructure implementation who will share their perspectives. And then finally, third, we'll bring everyone together for questions and answers. Of course, I need to welcome and thank our incredible speakers and panelists for today. Thank you to our presenters, Deputy Assistant Secretary Aimee Witteman and Commissioner Grace Arnold. And thanks in advance to our amazing panel, which includes Bob Blake, Dan Josephson, and Laura Ziegler. We are so grateful for your participation and expertise. With that, I'd like to welcome our first speaker, Aimee Witteman. Aimee is a former Minnesotan who left us for Washington, D.C. to serve with the Biden-Harris administration at the United States Department of Energy as a Deputy Assistant Secretary for Intergovernmental Affairs. Aimee has dedicated her career to building an equitable and just energy economy, and we're so grateful to have her here with us today. Welcome, Aimee.
Thank you, Justin. Thanks, everybody. It's great to be with all of you, especially with so many old friends and colleagues there in Minnesota. Let's see, I am trying to share my screen, but the host has disabled me. I don't know if I can be enabled. There we go. Okay. Isn't this so fun, y'all? Oh, do you know, are you able to share the slides that I shared, that I sent with you, Joe?
Yep, I have one slide. I will share that now.
Should have a deck of slides.
Oh, I do. Yep.
15
All good.
slides for me.
Please
Okay.
hold.
Thanks. Okay. Sorry for that momentary. Perfect. That's mine. So thanks again. Thanks everybody. And thanks to Fresh Energy and Cure for hosting this event. It's, I would expect nothing less from those two organizations getting the state ready for this massive investment of federal dollars to accelerate Minnesota's ambitious clean energy goals. So thank you for hosting this, creating the space for the discussion, and elevating this as the historic opportunity that it is. You can go to the next slide. Thanks, Joe. So as Justin said, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and not to make things even more confusing, but we are fond of calling this the bill at the Department of Energy. So that's what I'm going to be referring to it as, also known as IIJA. But the bill signed into law, IIJA, by the president last fall is truly a historic investment. It's the largest increase to the Department of Energy's budget since its founding in 1977. It includes $62 billion just for the Department of Energy. And we have been very busy since last November when it was signed into law, standing up 60 new programs at the Department of Energy, including 16 demonstration and 32 deployment programs, and expansion of 12 existing research development, demonstration and deployment programs, things like weatherization assistance program. But overall, the bill, this bipartisan infrastructure law, helps us tackle the climate crisis by making the largest investment in transmission and EV infrastructure in history. It also strengthens supply chains, lower prices, and eases the inflationary pressures that we're currently seeing on the economy over the long run. Finally, the bill makes critical investments in our future. It really is a visionary document that seeks to better communities' health, protect and increase jobs, and positions the United States to compete in the global marketplace. Importantly, and why I'm so excited about today's conversation is that states and cities play a major role in determining whether or not we will realize the climate and justice goals that are embedded in this new law. The bill funding, as we're going to talk about, will be delivered through a combination of formula grants to states and other entities, as well as competitive grants to states, territories, tribes, cities, and other local partners. So I'm just so glad to be on this panel today with Commissioner Grace Arnold and local reps from your CAP agency and the Highway Administration, of course, Bob Blake. So I'm going to, with the rest of my time, just briefly at a high level, give an overview of some of these programs in the bill that the Department of Energy is administering, where you can go for more information and how to get ready as a state for the funding that's going to be flowing shortly. So you can go to the next slide, please. So there's roughly four categories of funding. The first that I wanted to mention is that the bill expands access to energy efficiency and clean energy. So it invests $3.5 billion in the existing weatherization assistance program to increase energy efficiency, increase health and safety, and reduce energy burden for low-income households, cutting their energy costs by hundreds of dollars every year. It also invests in $500 million to provide cleaner schools for our children and teachers, providing energy efficiency and renewable energy investments in public school facilities in parallel with the expansion of electric school buses, spearheaded by the EPA. It also invests $550 million in the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant Program and $500 million in the State Energy Program that provides grants to communities, states, cities, territories, and tribes to develop and implement clean energy programs that will lower costs and jobs. This bucket of funding is really, these are some existing programs, a lot of existing programs that have been plus upped, and then some new funding, but this is obviously a huge priority area of interest, and we'll be eager to hear from Commissioner Arnold and others. A lot of this funding will be flowing through state energy offices. If you go to the next slide, This is just an additional note on the funding amounts that the increases to some of these existing programs that many of you know of, and a rough timeline of when these funding announcements are going to be made. We just announced the first round of the weatherization of assistance program a week or two ago. We're expecting EECBG later this fall, as well as the state energy programs later this quarter. Next slide, please. The second bucket of funding in the bill that I want to draw your attention to is this investment in American manufacturing and workers. So there's millions of dollars in workforce development to provide opportunities for workers in the electric grid, in clean buildings and industrial sectors, to access training, and to spur careers. It makes major investments in supply chains for advanced batteries, upwards of $7 billion a year, which is critical to modernizing the electric grid and supporting high-level clean energy deployment and adding energy storage and resilience tools to weather-related blackouts. Just yesterday, Secretary Granholm was in Michigan announcing part of this funding. She announced $3.16 billion to boost domestic battery manufacturing and supply chains. So that's just an example of the recent funding announcements coming out of the department almost every week. Next slide, please. There's a whole bunch of funding around the grid, upgrading the grid and modernizing the electric grid, making it more resilient to extreme weather events that we're seeing more frequently because of climate change, and also more resistant to cyber attacks. It establishes the new $2.5 billion transmission facilitation program, which is going to help build out transmission that's necessary to cost effectively provide access to clean electricity like wind and solar, while enhancing the reliability and resilience of our power system. It backs a $3 billion expansion of the Smart Grid investment matching grant program, which focuses on improving the flexibility of the grid, includes upgrading existing transmission and distribution systems, and other actions like deploying energy storage. A few weeks ago, we announced the new $6 billion civilian nuclear credit program. And this is really intended to prevent the premature retirement of existing zero carbon nuclear plants, helping to save thousands of good paying union jobs around the country. Next slide. Finally, the fourth big bucket is around these clean energy demonstration projects. So this is almost $22 billion in funding for everything from hydrogen hubs, carbon capture, direct capture hubs, advanced nuclear plants. And there's special funding set aside for demonstration in rural areas and in economically hard hit communities. The final sort of part of the bill that I wanted to mention, if you go to the next slide, is this $7.5 billion program for building out EV charging network across the country. And this funding is dually shared by the Department of Transportation and the Department of Energy. The funding going through Department of Energy is really for technical assistance, but this is formula funds, as I think a lot of you probably know, that is going to state departments of transportation to build out this network of charging infrastructure. It also provides training and certification, but the two agencies, Department of Transportation and Department of Energy, have created this new joint office that our secretaries signed an MOU to create a couple months ago. It's got a great website, this driveelectric.org, but this is where you can go to learn more about the formula funds, the state plan template that's due in August. And if you go to the next slide, Joe, we just have like a breakdown of some of those dates. So we already have had sort of the guidance posted. Those state plans are due in August. And I know we have someone here from the Highway Administration can talk more about this at the state level. But this is the largest investment in EV charging infrastructure, and obviously will make electric vehicles more accessible to everyone around the country, and reduce the nervousness that folks have about range anxiety. Let's see. a couple more slides I have in my section. If you go to the next one, Joe. So that was like a very quick, very high level whirlwind of like the big buckets of funding that are in the bipartisan infrastructure law. We have a part of the website at energy.gov that's dedicated for all of the announcements on bill funding. If you go to energy.gov and you can just navigate to the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law programs page, you can see recent announcements, either notices of intent, requests for information, or funding announcements that have been made. And this will be, updated on an ongoing basis. I believe we just added a button so you can subscribe to just get those updates delivered straight to your inbox. But all of the information on the programs I mentioned and more is at this website. You can also go to the White House's website, bill.gov, which is also keeping updated information on bipartisan infrastructure law funding across the administration, including the Department of Energy, but all of the other federal agencies. Next slide. This is just a quick reminder that the bill is different than the Recovery Act, where the funding in 2019 to get out the door immediately for those shovel-ready projects. This is really investing in rebuilding our infrastructure, building new infrastructure for the 21st century. A lot of this funding is over 5 to 10 years. So while we are moving extremely quickly to get these new programs up and going, we have whole new offices that are being created at the Department of Energy. The funding is going to move out to the states more slowly than other funding, big federal investments in the past. One thing I would just note on this is that the Department of Energy is unique in that a lot of the funding that's come to us, it is for new programs, and also most of it's competitively awarded. So we have not had as much information to share with the public as other agencies like EPA or the Department of Transportation, where you've got increases to existing formula programs. So again, I really encourage you to go to the Department of Energy's website, sign up for the subscription. I'll mention a newsletter opportunity at the end of my comments, just so that you can keep track of all of the announcements that are coming out. And again, just to mention that, states and cities and territories and tribes are so central to how this funding is going to be spent. And again, whether or not we meet these climate and energy and justice goals that are embedded in the infrastructure law. You can stay on this slide because I think I didn't have a chance to add this to the deck, but I wanted to mention, and we can talk about this more during the discussion period, but our Office of Policy is creating a state readiness toolkit, which I'm hoping will be released in the next couple of weeks. But I just wanted to throw out a couple questions that we're encouraging folks to begin thinking about. And knowing Minnesota, I'm sure you're already having a lot of these conversations, but as you're thinking about this massive investment, Justin mentioned $6.8 billion coming to the state, I think there's some questions to put at the forefront around what are the top 3 objectives Minnesota has for what you want to accomplish with the energy funding that's part of the bill. How can this help accelerate the Next Generation Energy Act goals around greenhouse gas emission reduction? How can this accelerate the work that's already going on thanks to the Clean Cars mandate that was passed last year? Does Minnesota, and I can't remember, Commissioner Arnold may know, does Minnesota have an infrastructure coordinator? This was something that Mitch Landrieu had sort of suggested each state have. Folks are starting to get appointed into those roles. And if there isn't an infrastructure coordinator in Minnesota, how are you working to ensure that all of the pertinent agencies are working together to maximize, again, the impact of this funding? The State Energy Office, the Commission, Department of Transportation, EQB, workforce development, DEED, how are they all working together to sort of, again, think about what are our big goals as a state and how can we best leverage this funding that's coming in to accelerate those goals on clean energy, climate, and justice? How are you coordinating with tribes, with local cities, with relevant labor unions? How are you thinking about engaging disadvantaged communities in helping to shape how this funding is spent, and also how to leverage things like green banks, and bonds to make this money go as far as possible? So those are just like a couple questions that towards the end of my comments, I wanted to leave you with. The very final thing I wanted to mention, if you want to go to the next slide, I think I have 2 slides left, is that I'm so thrilled that in my position at the Department of Energy, and because of Secretary Granholm's leadership and commitment to taking a place-based approach to this work, the department is not only turning more from, including its long-term research and development, but turning towards the deployment. We are also really looking to increase our connection with local and state governments. So I've got a team of regional specialists, and the specialist for the Midwest is Rose Dottie, longtime Detroit leader. And I'm going to put her contact information into the chat box, but she is your best point of contact. If you want to know, hey, Rose, when is state energy program funding, likely to be announced, or how can we get involved? How do we get that readiness toolkit? She puts out a weekly newsletter on Fridays out to all of the Midwest states, so you can sign up to receive that. But she is a perfect point of contact for all of you in Minnesota moving forward to stay abreast of all the opportunities that are coming your way. And I think that's it. There may be one last slide, which just, again, you can reach all the specialists at that distribution list. So I'll put both that and Rose Dottie's contact information in the chat. Otherwise, looking forward to the conversation portion. Thanks again for having me.
Thank you so much, Aimee. It's so great to have you, at least virtually, back in Minnesota. It's been a long time, and it's great to see your face again. So now we're going to zoom a little closer to home. I'd like to introduce our next panelist, our next presenter, Commissioner Grace Arnold of the Minnesota Department of Commerce. Commissioner Arnold was appointed by Governor Walz in April of 2021. And leads the Minnesota Department of Commerce in ensuring that Minnesota's regulated markets are fair and accessible to all Minnesotans, and that our state is a leader in creating a clean energy economy. Commissioner Arnold, the floor is yours. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here to talk about the state, what we're doing at the state to maximize federal funds. I think in one of the early meetings I had with stakeholders about this, someone encouraged us to be maximalist. And all I could think of was like a very, very boldly designed, interior designed room. And so I think about that a lot. And so that's our goal, is the equivalent of that, but for all the federal funds. So I'm going to talk about a few things that we're doing at the department, and then focus the bulk of my time on our proposals that we have in the state legislature this year, because that's really going to be sort of the foundation of unlocking a lot of the other funds that are available. So Aimee mentioned the infrastructure coordinator. We're working within the climate subcabinet and with the governor's office to kind of identify the needs across all the agencies. And it's really important to me that if we want to be maximalist, we have to work really well together. So that's something that we're working on and we're coordinating together. We at the department have hired our own, or we're in the process, got ahead of myself. We are in the process of hiring a director for the infrastructure bill within the state energy office. So, there's sort of the staffing, and then there's going to be some legislation and funding. And then there's going to be the next part, which Aimee also talked about, which is all of you. And that's the, getting the money out. So I'm going to focus the bulk of my comments on what we've proposed at the state legislature to be the foundation to then getting the funds to you, to the state, and really being able to capitalize on all the federal funds that are available. So Joe, if you could throw my slide up right now. So in general, our philosophy is maximize, maximize, maximize. I don't need to say this again, but I will. It's a once in a generation opportunity. This is like super, super exciting. And I'm really glad that we are positioned well in Minnesota to take advantage of the funding opportunities. So I'll walk through our budget proposals at the state level. Some of them are a bit beyond just the federal, Infrastructure Act dollars, and you'll see why I'm going to talk about all of them, because they're all kind of important in, creating and investing in the long-term infrastructure and a clean energy economy. So I'm going to run through them. You can see them here on the slide. We have a state competitiveness fund, which I'll talk quite a bit about, at $20 million. That's what we think we need to go after some of the federal funds. There's weatherization assistance. We've asked for close to $60 million here. This is to wrap around the federal dollars. And, Aimee made a couple comments about the difference between this law and the ARA law. One thing that we've been talking quite a bit about within the department is how we prevent cliffs and how we these are long-term investments, but some of the influxes will be temporary. And so how do we make sure that we can make any influx in funds go as far as possible for as long as possible? This is one of the programs where we've thought a lot about that. We proposed $18 million for wastewater infrastructure. That was for energy efficiency. We had a solar for schools proposal as well, which I'll get to. I'm glad that Aimee mentioned the green bank, because we have a few proposals that are all aimed at kind of accelerating clean energy economy. So one is the Decarbonization Technology Fund. That's aimed to be like a very early stage investment fund. We have grants for renewable integration and demonstrations coming out of the renewable development account at $5 million a year. And then we have a proposal for a green bank at $34 million a year. So we're really, in thinking about everything together, our goal was to put forward a robust proposal that capitalizes on the money that's available at the federal level, but also it can accelerate our clean energy economy beyond just, and really make sure that we can make it work together as much as possible. So this is a total proposal of just under $170 million from the general fund, and then $5 million annually from the renewable development account. So I'm going to talk about the State Competitiveness Fund first and go in a little bit more detail. That's really the key to unlocking formula and competitiveness, competitive funds that are made available in the bill. Multiple funding opportunities could have a really significant impact on rural and economically disadvantaged communities where the funding is needed most, for work on preventing grid outages, for municipal and co-op utilities, and for developing energy-related working training opportunities. So Aimee mentioned that there are 60 new programs. A significant amount of the funding is related to utilities, and the match requirement is dependent on the size of the utility, and it has to be new money. So match funding from the state would help utilities. So the State Competitiveness Fund would help to provide match funding from the state to pursue competitive funding opportunities without having the negative impact of having the ratepayers have to pay for those investments. And one of the key matching opportunities that we're looking at is grid resilience and reliability. It's formula funding, and it's about preventing outages and increasing reliability. I want to touch on Aimee's question about our sort of goals at the end, but this is getting at one of the goals. So the bill directs the Department of Energy to establish a new formula grant program to states and tribal nations to reduce the impact to the electrical grid on extreme weather. So we all saw the wildfires in the Boundary Waters last year. One of the interesting things about being the Commissioner of Commerce is I see the insurance side, where natural disasters are like a really big deal. They're a big deal on the electric grid too. So that's one of the things that we think a lot about as we're thinking about things from a cross-agency perspective. And the bill also establishes a grant program to other eligible entities, including grid operators and owners and transmission owners. So that has a 30% set aside for small utilities. And then the small utilities have a 33% match. Larger utilities have a 100% match. This is the kind of thing that, providing some state funds to make those matches is what we're looking for in the State Competitiveness Fund. We learned last week that Minnesota will receive approximately $6 million each for each of the 5 years in that section of the law directly to tribal nations. And I'm not going to go through the specific dollar amounts, but, I think the theme here is going to be there's a lot of money coming through, and we just need to keep it going and get it to tribes, or to, some of it will funnel through the state energy office, but my goal is to get as much of it out as we can. So that's the State Competitiveness Fund, again, really aimed at matching grid resilience, grid reliability, and being able to capitalize on where we have to do competitive or formula matches. We also included just under $60 million of weatherization assistance to permanently lower home energy bills. And I'm not going to get too much into the benefits of weatherization because I know that there are colleagues on here, other panelists who will be able to speak to that much more than I can. But this is a money saver for people. It's less energy, and our budget proposal would help 15,000 income eligible Minnesotans. So, we're going to get an increase in funding through the Infrastructure Act. We would love to be able to do either address barriers that make houses ineligible for weatherization funding, things like, disrepaired roofs or inaccessible crawl spaces. If we can't use the additional funding because of something like that, I think we're really losing an opportunity. And so I'm going to leave it to the more detailed experts, but I'm really excited. We got a $76 million extra dollars for our weatherization program, and I really want to make that money go as far as possible. And so I'm hoping that the legislature will agree and allocate some funding to this program. So the next I want to talk about, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time here, is Solar for Schools. So Solar for Schools is just what it sounds like, putting solar on schools. We received $11.7 million in requests from the first round of funding, and the legislature had only allocated $8 million or $7.5 million only allocated $8 million to the program. So we well exceeded our capacity. And so we have school districts, so we're going to award the money that we have, and we know that there's unmet need. This program lines really nicely with the grants for energy efficiency and renewable energy improvements at public school facilities. So we're excited that we're all kind of thinking in the same direction, and funding at the state level for this program may pair nicely with the DOE program. So that is supposed to open up in the fall. We would really love to connect with school districts or others who are thinking about partnering or thinking about that opportunity, and understanding, how we can best use those funds, how we can best use the state funds, and how we can pull down as much of the money as we can. So I'm going to talk through the three clean energy economy proposals that we have. So the first is a decarbonization fund, or Energy Alley. I think it was renamed through the process. We would also we also propose to launch a green bank, and then provide grants for renewable energy integration and deployment into the grid. So these proposals align really well with the bill, and because there are multiple competitive grant opportunities that exist within this space. And so, what we're really interested in is how to be able to, assuming the legislature agrees with us and can pass some of these, how we can use those tools to then explore ways to make them work together with the federal funds. And Aimee noted that at the outset. So I'm really glad that that you called that out, Aimee. So there are a couple other programs that we're watching, but we don't have a ton of information on. I think Aimee mentioned the energy efficiency and conservation block grant programs. Those will be grants, and those will run through the department, but will go to through the department for small cities. So we'll want to have a lot of conversations with smaller cities about how to use that additional money. And there is a revolving loan fund capitalization grant program. I don't envy the person who's going to come up with the acronym for that one, but that's going to establish a revolving fund that the state will provide loans and grants for energy efficiency audits and upgrades. Buildings make up a huge chunk. I think it's 40% of our energy use. And so we really want to make sure that we can focus on decarbonizing and making more efficient our buildings. So, I went through a whole lot of stuff. I think just to bring it back up a level, we want to make the most of this funding. We need a lot of partnership to do that. We need a lot of communication with you, with your colleagues, and anyone who's interested to do that. So we've established, we have a website at the department where we are posting things as we know. We have some, we also are sending out information as we learn it. And then, for those of you who interact regularly with our state energy office, with our weatherization program or our energy assistance program, keep talking to us about what you need, because we can't do it alone. You can't do it alone. We all need to be working together to pull down as many of the funds as we can so that we can be working toward reliable energy, affordable energy, and clean energy for Minnesotans. So that concludes my remarks, and I'll look forward to the Q&A panel too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Commissioner. It was a pleasure having you here, and we really appreciated your comments and helping us better understand Minnesota's approach to maximizing these funds. We're now going to move to our panel discussion, and it's my privilege to introduce our three distinguished panelists. So if you all could turn your cameras on, the stage is now going to be yours. So welcome to first Bob Blake, Executive Director, Native Son Community Power Development. Second, Dan Josephson, Energy Director, Mahaba Atwa Community Action Partnership. And finally, Laura Ziegler, Associated General Contractors of Minnesota. And finally, my colleague, Eric Fowler, Senior Coalition Communications and Policy Associate here at Fresh Energy, will be facilitating this conversation and the Q&A that follows. Eric.
Great. Thank you, Justin. As Justin said, my name is Eric. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm on staff here at Fresh Energy, and I am delighted to welcome our panelists. Thank you so much, and welcome to Bob, Dan, and Laura. And we'll just go ahead and take 60 seconds each and do a round robin to tell folks here a bit about yourselves and your organizations. So with that, let's start off with Bob.
Yes, hi everyone. Thanks, Eric. Anine, bonjour everyone. Hello. My name is Bob Blake. I'm from Red Lake Nation, tribal citizen. I'm also the executive director of Native Son Community Power Development. We're a nonprofit located in South Minneapolis, and I'm also the owner of Solar Bear, also located in downtown Minneapolis. Both of these organizations primarily focusing on renewable energy demonstrations and workforce development, education, specifically around the Native community and also in tribal nations. And glad to be here. Thank you. Miigwech.
Thank you so much. And Laura, can you tell us a bit about you and AGC Minnesota?
Hello, my name is Laura Ziegler. No affiliation to Ziegler Caterpillar, which I get that question a lot in the construction industry. It is such a pleasure to be here this morning, especially with Bob and Dan and you all. Thanks for tuning in. I am the Director of Government Affairs at Associated General Contractors of Minnesota. AGC is a statewide, nonprofit, nonpartisan trade association. We represent various contractors of all sizes across the state that do work in both horizontal and vertical construction. So whether it's highway work, wastewater, water, utility, along with commercial building, basically everything with the exception of single family housing. So we work on trying to advance the construction industry and making sure that we have a vibrant, diverse contractor community. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Laura. And Dan, can you tell us a bit about your work in Northwest Minnesota?
Sure. Yeah, thanks for having me today. I'm Dan Josephson. I am the Director of Energy Programs here at Mahaba Atwa Community Action Partnership. Mahaba Atwa is the first two letters of each of the counties that we serve. So it's Mahnomen, Hubbard, Becker, Otter Tail, and Wadena. Our organization was born out of the war on poverty, just like all the other community action agencies that cover 99% of the country. I oversee the Energy Assistance Program, where we bring energy assistance and help about 6,000 households in our counties each year pay for energy bills. And then on the other side, I oversee the weatherization program, where we try to solve some of those energy burden issues, try to reduce people's energy costs and make their homes more comfortable and more safe.
Great. Thanks, Dan. So we got some great context at the top from DOE and Commerce. So I'm hoping we can dive in a little bit more kind of at the ground level. These funds will go towards much needed investments in weatherization, energy efficiency, power and grid, electric transportation, and more, all of which play a major role in our climate future as we seek energy independence. And weatherization has been in the news a lot lately, so we're going to start there. Dan, this is your organization's bread and butter. So what does this federal investment mean for how you do your work in the Detroit Lakes area?
Yeah, great question. There's a lot of excitement out there. Traditionally we've got weatherization funds that come in each year that we use to help weatherize homes. The influx of dollars is exciting, and it's also kind of a testament to the trust that the federal and state level has in the weatherization program. And in order to do our jobs, we're asking for flexibility, and it sounds like that's part of what's happening here, and that's much appreciated. On top of that, it was alluded to by both the federal and state level commentators. Basically a long-term investment, and 5 to 10 years investment in this program gives us an opportunity to ramp up our staffing so we can actually provide more good to low-income individuals and households. So the things that we're really looking forward to is being able to solve some of those issues on the reasons why we walk away from a home where there's deficiencies in the structure of the home, reshingling, some of the windows, because a lot of people think that weatherization is windows and doors. It really isn't. It's the inside the home and getting things more efficient rather than kind of doing a makeup outside of the home. So yeah, it's reasons to give us flexibility, and it's giving us reasons to say yes, we can weatherize your home, because it's the people that are living in the worst conditions that need this the most, and that's what we're looking to solve here with the influx of dollars.
Great. Thank you, Dan. I want to pivot to the connection between implementation and jobs. So Laura, one of the things that I've heard you say when we were preparing for this is the need to ensure that jobs are sustainable career pathways. And AGC Minnesota and your members are leaders in advancing building and highway construction. So can you speak a little bit about what you see as the biggest opportunity for jobs and long-term sustainable job growth in the full picture of the infrastructure bill, not just weatherization?
Thank you so much for the question, Eric. This is a little bit of our soapbox, if you will, because we advocate on a high level for things like a capital investment bill or a bonding bill at the state level, for example, comprehensive, sustainable, multimodal, you name it, funding. And so I appreciate the earlier comments that this is an influx, but it also is formulary dollars over time. That is a critical difference than what we saw post-recession with the ARPA funds, because when the construction industry has fits and starts like that, where there are massive infusion, not only is it difficult, for communities to plan for it when money has to get out the door, and then you hear that term shovel-ready projects, right? We want them to be shovel-worthy projects, and we want communities to be able to plan in the same way we want construction businesses to be able to also plan out and make sure that they can be in the best position to put in solid proposals for all the clients, which is all of you. It's going to be local governments, state governments, federal level, tribes, all of that client base. And so it's good for everyone if we have that sustainable funding, and we don't have folks that we bring in to the workforce, either as business owners, as trade workers, as workers in an office space, whether that's digital or in person, that we bring them in and then we cannot sustain those jobs. We want them to be careers. And that's what we want to emphasize, and why at least this bill, I kind of like that pun, but it is helpful in that regard, in that it's a mix of both the formulary funds, which is dominant, but then also these other opportunities with the discretionary funds, and that also benefits construction firms.
Thank you, Laura. So obviously, a lot of us at Fresh Energy and our partners are really excited about what the bill means for clean energy. So Bob, as an entrepreneur in the clean energy space, we know that you have your finger on the pulse of a lot of these big funding opportunities. Can you tell us how you think the federal investments through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law will impact the renewable development work that you do on solar, and especially thinking about communities that have traditionally been bypassed by opportunities like this?
Yeah, great question, Eric. I mean, tribal nations aren't any different than counties, CAP agencies, or associations, in states where we have to make our dollars stretch, to serve the most amount of people we can. And I think through this, what a lot of tribal nations are looking at is how do we propel this into something that could be sustainable and that could turn into something that could be an economic development tool for our communities. So, there's never been an opportunity like this where we have the technology that's allowing us to be able to do the types of things that we're able to do now by distributing and then generating power through renewable energy. And so I see a lot of tribal nations, at least, they're calling me and they're talking to me like, how do we create our utility? How do we start training our members? How do we start putting together a project? And it's just been so exciting because I get those calls every day from tribal nations from all across the country. And so I see this happening in our communities. And it's just been a real excitement. And this investment that we're getting from the federal government into the tribal nations is just historic. And so I think all the tribes are really trying to sit there and say to themselves, how can we best utilize this money and make the greatest amount of difference? So I'm really excited where this is going, and just being able to see these tribes, look at what are transmission lines, what are these distribution facilities you're talking about, Bob? You know what I mean? Just all these different questions. I mean, we've never talked about this before. And then how do we create our workforce development how do we create our tribal members to do this stuff? So yeah, this is going to be great. I'm really excited for it. And I know a lot of tribes are planning for this. And I just see some good things down the road happening from all this.
Thanks so much. Thank you so much, Bob. And we have got a lot of really excellent questions that have been coming in, and we want to maximize our time here. So I'm going to pivot pretty quickly into Q&A here, and we're going to welcome responses from everyone. So we would welcome back Aimee Witteman and Commissioner Arnold. And also, please feel free to continue submitting those. We are not going to get to all of them, I know, but I also know that some of our panelists have been jumping into that Q&A feature to answer them directly within that box. So thank you all so much for sharing your perspectives and kind of where you're coming from as we're thinking about these opportunities. So the first pre-submitted question that I want to dive right into and open up the floor to is, how can local and state policymakers ensure that our state takes full advantage of these federal funds? And I'm going to welcome, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say something to that, and this is also, Commissioner, you're on the call here. I think one of the things is the Tribal Energy Advisory Council that's currently going through the legislature right now. This is very important that tribes are able to go ahead and partner with the state on this and be able to do their energy planning. I mean, and it's not just because of pipelines, but we've got transmission projects that are running through our land too now. So, and I'm not saying there's any bad actors out there, but I think it would be very good that if we had the state involved, that could also be a part of these planning projects. So we could, work together because this is like we said, this is historical that's coming down the road. And on, these transmission lines are going to be going through tribal nations' backyards. So, I really hope that thing gets passed.
I also hope that gets passed. So that for those who aren't aware, that's the department in our consultation with tribal governments. We put forward a bill that would create a tribal energy council that would be staffed and would be an advisory council to the department. So that's one that I really hope would get passed. And these kinds of discussions I think would be great for that council. From my perspective, passing the competitiveness fund so that we have the matching funds is probably the first thing to do. So, for you all, if this is something you're interested in, I would just say, hearing from state and local leaders local county cities to your representatives, either senators, state senators or state representatives, that will make a big difference. And so that's probably the first thing we need to do. And then we need to start to, it's something we've started, but having conversations with anyone who's interested, especially as the programs roll out. We'll kind of have to probably do this in a piecemeal way, like, one program rolls out and we figure out, okay, who's interested, but we'll all have to work together to figure out how to get the money. So in some cases, the state might not be the competitor, but there may be ways that we can provide technical assistance, or we can facilitate conversations. In other cases, we may be the right competitive entity to put forward a grant proposal, but the money might then go out to states or to cities or local governments, or tribes. I think will mostly get it directly, or some of it will just automatically go through. But all of that, just we need to do the right way and the best way to get the most money, and we'll just have to be kind of all working together to figure out what that is, especially since there's a long time horizon. It's like kind of nice. I don't envy you, Aimee, and your teams, but that will give us some time to be able to really plan and get, and I don't want to give the impression we have too much time, but that will give us the ability to organize to pull down as much of the money as we can.
Can I jump in on this one too? I think, talked about this at the outset again, but this is, I joined this administration because this president ran on the most ambitious climate platform in history. We also have, the most ambitious equity goals in US history as part of this administration. And, it remains to be seen if we will get more legislation passed at the federal level. And so this is like our best shot, not only to like rebuild for the 21st century, but to really firmly accelerate the clean energy and justice trajectory that Minnesota and other states are on. And Minnesota has been like a leading state in this respect across the country, and certainly in the Midwest. So to the extent it's, with the infrastructure person that commissioners hiring, and, other agencies and NGOs and community members can get together and really say, like, what is our vision for how we want this federal money to accelerate? Where are the places we are going to focus that make a material difference to the climate math equation, to the justice commitments that the state has and that the federal government has? Like, I think there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of chaos, quite honestly, because there's so much money. It's flowing in different ways. You know, the department right now is standing up a lot of these programs. More guidance will be coming from DOE on the programs that we administer. But I think that's another thing. While you've got a little bit of this window of time, is not only to secure the matching funds at the state level, but is to like start to imagine, like, where do we want to be, you know, 5 years from now, and how can this federal money really help us to get there? So just encourage, and you've got so much like robust civil society infrastructure there with Fresh Energy and Cure and others that can help support that. So it's just a little finer point on something I'd said earlier.
Yeah, could I jump in here? Because I know we're talking about flexibility and long-term. One thing that I do look for is some guidance soon, so we can get going and we can start spending the money and get it out the door and get it into people's homes and get it into the people's hands that really need this money. Because the worst thing to do is kind of wait around, and then we start to slowly slip away, and then the money goes back to the federal government, and it's not being used as it's intended. So give us some guardrails, give us the ability to say yes, and let us solve the problems on the ground as we see them within the guidance that you're giving us. So that's one thing that I really want to encourage.
And if I could just wrap this with a bow, as the lobbyist on the one of the lobbyists on the panel, we have 19 days left of our state legislative session. We're not guaranteed to have special sessions every 30 days like we were privy to the last couple years. And so certainly advocacy with contacting legislators at the state level. Frankly, I don't want to take the wind out of the sails of anybody, but there's a lot of hesitancy right now because of the level of uncertainty, especially with these discretionary funds, on putting up some of the matching dollars. So if we can support local entities, state entities, in trying to put their best foot forward, there are going to be other factors that are going to put them in really solid position for some of these funds as the guidance comes out, I suspect. But it doesn't hurt to also have some flexibility with the funding requests that agencies have right now. And I think they can also build in accountability and transparency that the legislators are looking for. And hopefully we'll have additional opportunities next year as well as the rolling guidance comes out. So certainly I would just encourage everyone to also reach out to their legislator, both Senate and representatives, to support those requests.
Thank you all so much for that. And I know that we are running quickly up against time. I want to squeeze in at least one more question if we can. Otherwise, I know that if any of our panelists have to drop off right away, that is completely understandable. So this came in from the viewers. Will any of these funds go to electric co-ops? And could they be used to help transition the business model for municipal gas utilities? So a couple specific questions there.
So the answer to the first one is yes. And I believe the answer to the second one is yes too, but I need to double check on that one. It may not be like so straightforward as just a transition. A lot of programs that are about modifying the way that utilities are doing their business. And so I think that we can get back to I'll encourage our team to talk to the person who asked.
Great, thank you. And then finally, I
think Aimee has her hand.
I mean, I would.
Great. Thank you.
I'll throw it in the chat. Yeah, same as the commissioner. So let Commissioner Arnold follow up on that. But I'm also seeing a lot of questions in the chat about Justice 40, and so I can put a response to that if that's not going to be the question you ask us, Eric, at the end here. I'll just put some information in the chat.
That is super helpful. I welcome that, Aimee. I think. Yeah, I was going to pivot to a final question on jobs, and just again, if there's any Any final thoughts on ensuring the most benefit to workers and job seekers as the spending ramps up?
I can jump in on that. I mean, so there's a couple, obviously jobs is, in addition to climate and equity, jobs is a major focus. There are tons of job opportunities in the bill, that this is going to be, we're talking about building so much stuff. And so good paying jobs, union jobs, that Buy America is all embedded in this, as Justice 40 is, which is 40% of all the federal investments. The benefits of those investments are to go to disadvantaged communities. I was going to mention that Shalonda Baker is our lead on this at the Department of Energy, and she's really a leader on this nationally and across the administration. And so this is all be embedded into the applications, especially those competitive funds. But I also just wanted to mention that the Department of Energy, in order to ramp up to actually implement this money, we are hiring over 1,000 people. So I would encourage folks to look at the Clean Energy Corps. If you're looking to throw in this space that, project managers, engineers, the whole gamut. So there's jobs both in administering these funds at a high level. And that's the true, same is true at Department of Transportation, but also obviously, actual workforce parameters that are part of the funding itself.
Thank you so much. And thank you also, Aimee, for being active, trying to help answer so many of these questions that have popped into the box. We are at time. We had a lot of wonderful experts and stakeholders, and sorry that we did not get to all of those questions, but I hope that this was a good space for connecting some dots and getting valuable information. Huge thank you to Aimee Witteman, to Commissioner Arnold, Bob Blake, Dan Josephson, and Laura Ziegler. Thank you for sharing your expertise and perspectives. And thank you to my co-host, Justin Fay, and our amazing communications wizard, Joe Olson. So we will be emailing out everyone who registered a recording of the webinar. That'll be either this afternoon or tomorrow. So stay tuned for that link. And have a great day. Thank you so much for spending this time with us.